You've seen the title. I hate the SM58. But I love the SM57. Okay, so this is actually a discussion video. I did a video a couple of years ago called The SM58 Sucks, which was kind of a similar thing to this, but I don't think people understood where I was coming from and didn't hang around for an explanation. All the kind of old Git crowd, 60 years plus were like, you don't know what you're talking about, the SM58, blah, 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 essays this long. Stop and listen. I'm in Middle Farm Studios, which is arguably one of the best studios in England right now, and I looked through all the mic lockers, didn't find a single SM58 anywhere, but I found about 20 of these things, which I say I love the SM57, this one actually says not the best on it. I think that's because this one may have been, damaged, changed, I don't know. I've done several videos recently on SM57s. Specifically, they are a really good instrument mic. Although I never used to like them, but that's me and personal bias and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about the SM58 for just a minute. SM actually stands for studio microphone. These were not designed for live use, as the name implies. The SM58 is very much like a 57, but with a grill basket mesh. It's a cardioid dynamic microphone, which makes it really good for handheld use. It means that when it was designed, it was probably one of the most rugged microphones out there. I will completely concede that you can use one as a hammer, and for the time that they were designed, they sounded really good through PA systems of the time. They held their own on a live stage, but what people don't tend to consider is how the world has changed, and live sound in particular has changed massively over the years. When the 58 was designed, generally speaking, the way that a stage setup might be would be that the drum kit would have a few mics around it to try and amplify it. The guitars and the bass would not be amplified through the PA system. They might have a full stack or 2 or 4 full stacks for the guitars, same for the bass, and those would just blast out at the audience. And then the vocals would be piped through the PA system to be heard over the top of those guitar amps. Now that firstly meant there wasn't nearly as much sound going through the PA systems of that time, in terms of the number of signals at least, which means that the clarity was arguably easier to do. This is something that I've seen demonstrated by guys like Dave Rat recently, who is the sound engineer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. What he was demonstrating was trying to put all the sound for monitor foldback through a single speaker system makes it really hard to make out what's going on, but if you separate the sources, so say put the vocals through their own separate wedges, suddenly that separation makes it really easy to pick out the tone and pick out the sound and pick out notes, pitch, definition, all the rest. But coming back to the actual PA speakers of the time, they were maybe not nearly as hi-fi as we can get now. I say maybe, they definitely weren't as hi-fi. I've got a couple of classic PA columns from the 70s, which had Celestion G12H speakers in, which most of us know as guitar speakers, and a top horn that really just kind of sounded quite harsh and brittle. Those combined with something like an SM58 seemed to make a quite reasonable sound. But having used something like that recently, and I tried to use it at a rehearsal and then tried to do testing in kind of show environments, there was absolutely no detail to it, and kind of the low end was muffled. The top end just had no detail, and if we tried to EQ in some detail, we ended up in Feedback City, population singer. Thing is, as live sound has developed through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, all the way to now, We've got more efficient drivers in the systems, clearer tweeters, we've got much more power handling in the systems. It's rare now that a guitarist or a bass player will take more than one stack on tour. Generally, they'll have the speakers off stage so there's no bleed into the microphones. People expect a really crystal clear hi-fi sound. And they expect that at gigs that are relatively small as well. You might find that maybe a 500 cap venue or a 300 cap venue might be expecting a really crystal clear sound from every member of the band. That's where the SM58, in my opinion, falls behind. Is it a bad microphone? No, not at all. It's a decent microphone. And in a lot of circumstances, it works quite well. And there are certain singers whose voices match really, really well with that microphone, but I think that's actually quite rare. I think a lot of bigger artists, a lot of people say, oh, this guy or this person still uses an SM58, therefore they're the best. No. That artist has probably been using that same microphone capsule for 30, 40, 50 years, and that's now what they're used to hearing, so they insist on using that. Despite the sound engineer's best wishes, they really wish that these guys would use a more up-to-date tonal profile on a mic that maybe rejects feedback better, rejects spill from the other instruments better, comes across more clearly to the audience. All those kind of things you just can't have when an older artist says, I'm using this, and stamps their feet like a little child. Also, on a really big stage, like let's say, I don't know, a Bruce Springsteen show or something like that, just pulling your name out of a hat. Could be that he uses a 58 still, just a big rock artist. If they've got a drum kit that is 20 feet away, they've got musicians who are 30 feet away on these big, massive arena stages, you can use pretty much any microphone you like because there's so little spill that the sound engineer can EQ this, EQ that, and really dip out the frequencies they don't like with minimal impact. When you start getting to smaller stages, like kind of 1000 cap, 500 cap, 300 cap, the stages are much smaller, so the sound from all the other players, like the drummer especially, really start to become an issue because they really start to leak onto all the other microphones, and trying to get clarity out of a mic in that situation, you really start to have to resort to some extreme techniques, like really extreme gating, anti-feedback technology that really notches out loads of frequencies, extreme multi-band parametric EQs, all that kind of stuff that is really just fighting an uphill battle. Now, a lot of the microphone manufacturers out there have known about this problem for a long time and have started to make microphones that suit this task much better. Like SE Electronics are really killing it with their V7 right now. Miles Kennedy from Slash Band and Alter Bridge uses a V7. There are more and more artists that I'm seeing using SE Electronics' V7 capsules on everything because they cut out so much background spill and sound more present and modern. I'm not sponsored by SE, by the way, they're just a name that I picked out of the hat. Audix make some really clear mics. Shure themselves make the KSM range. They make, and the Beta range as well, like the Beta 58 is something that they've been making for a long time because they know that that's a requirement. And for a lot of vocalists who see a Shure mic, if it's a Beta 58A, that's a much clearer microphone with higher gain before feedback, less spill, all that kind of stuff. Brilliant. You know, all the big brands make microphones that suit that much better and in the same price range before anybody says, oh, but it's more expensive. It's not. You're probably looking at $100, $120 for a lot of these microphones. You know, Sontronics make the Solo, which is one of my favorites. I've got the Sennheiser MD435, which is not cheap, but is a really great sounding mic live. You can get Neumann capsules, although the spill on them is a bit much. But let's talk about the 57 again for a second, because even the 57's got a beta 57A, which in a lot of cases, this is an instrument mic, cuts out a lot more background noise, background spill, which means that that source is clearer and cleaner. And so even Shure have recognised that these dependable old microphones are not perfect. I mean, yes, and again, some people are going to say, the president of the USA uses SM57 microphones, therefore they're great. No, they use them because tradition at this point. Tradition does not mean something's the best. If it's working fine in that circumstance, great. But when you think about a presidential speech, they've not got a full band with a full drum kit smashing away in the background. People are respectful and generally quiet, which means that then the sound engineer can do what they have to do with that. So again, that's fine. So I'm not absolutely trashing any of these mics. They're all good, serviceable units. But for a lot of us, I think, especially in the live arena, it's time to move on and look at the alternatives. Not just from other companies, but Shure themselves. They know that they can make better equipment, and they do. So yeah, I still like the SM57 on guitar cabs, because if you've got a guitar cab here giving you 100 plus decibels and you've got a microphone here, you don't really need to worry about spill. And in the studio, SM microphones, 57, 58, SM7B, they sound good, they sound great. The SM7B is a little bit of a pain in my backside because it's a really low output microphone, but I use things like cloud lifters with those and get around that kind of circumstance. And I have an SM7 in my mixing setup as my vocal mic. Sounds great, but there are more microphones coming out that are trying to do better with better sound, better rejection characteristics. If you've ever had a podcast with like 3 or 4 people with SM7s on, you'll see the engineer really panicking in the edit to try and cut in between each one, so there's not as much spill and bleed, because when you get that spill, you get phasing issues, you get weirdness, you get comb filtering, and just making sure that's not there at all is something you can do with a different model of microphone. But yeah, these guys don't have any SM58s in the drawer. I did have one at the studio, which I got for like $5 in a garage sale, which I don't think I've ever used. But having been out live on several tours as a tech, as the frontman of the band, if given a choice, I'll never pick an SM58. I will always pick whatever the alternative is. Even if it's a Shure, like a beta 58A, I will pick something that is not the 58, because it was a great mic, it's still a dependable mic, but to me, it's had its day. So there you go. I hope you found that this was kind of trying to be balanced and fair and not just trashing a company, because Shure don't deserve it, they've made great stuff. And that you maybe got some enjoyment out of this. Thanks to all our patrons on Patreon for supporting me to make ridiculous rant videos like this. Thanks to the guys from Middle Farm Studios for letting me film these ridiculous videos. And thanks to Mike Mallion for having me over here to do some session work with him. And thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.